You know, a lot has changed in policing in the last 40 years, but the one thing that hasn't changed is our need for a mindset that we are willing to survive the deadly encounter. Our guest today is going to help us do that.
You are a warrior.
321 status.
What kind of vehicle is it?
You are the very best your nation has to offer.
911.
Multiple shots fired.
They're asking you to lead.
5. We need a Bearcat.
It's up to us.
So 133. I need somebody that's got a visual on where the shooter is.
You must be sound in mind, body, and spirit.
40 feet, where's the officer down? I have a rescue helicopter that wants to land and help.
This is the podcast that will make you the one.
Copy, running eastbound.
The one that will bring everyone back.
Trouble, we have shots fired, shots fired. Give me backup now.
Because no one else is coming.
We're going to have an officer shot. 100 block of East Street.
Suspect is down. Suspect is down.
This is the Squad Room.
Hello, partners. Welcome back to another episode of the Squad Room. I'm your host, Garrett Tesla. I'm sitting here in sunny Southern California, where I am a sergeant for a sheriff's office. And on this show, we tease out information given to us by subject matter experts in a variety of fields that can help us achieve our personal goals, our professional goals, all the things that can make us better at our jobs and help us navigate this very difficult career, very challenging career, very rewarding career. But to navigate those things in the manner that keeps us the safest, the healthiest, the most present with our family, any topic that we can cover where we feel that we can achieve something and improve our lives out of it, we're going to hit on that in this show. And of course, leadership being a big part of that as well. So on today's show, speaking of leaders, we have a great guest. Many of you have attended his seminar, Street Survival. And many more of you read his magazine or his webpage. It's Lieutenant Jim Glennon. Jim is now the owner of Calibre Press, well-known law enforcement website. And, of course, now social media and such as well. But they are one of the only publishers of law enforcement specific books out there in the world. And they do a lot of good work, for cops out there, getting them some new information and some new knowledge. Jim took over Calibre. He wasn't the founder, but he took over Calibre some years ago, and we talk about that. But Jim, for the last 15 years or so, has been the lead instructor for the Street Survival course. And that's a course that's traveled around the country and, in fact, I think the world, and has always heard great things about it, and always well received. And it's always crucial information that we don't touch a lot on this show about that will to survive and the tactics. And I get asked a lot of times why, or if I should have a show on specific tactics or on case law, that sort of thing. But I don't do that intentionally. And the reason is that tactics vary state to state and also country to country. And this show is, not to boast, but just a fact that the show is international. People listen from all over. And if I were to talk about tactics that we use in California, I know that tactics like that aren't used elsewhere, and vice versa. I know for a fact that we do things in California quite differently than many other states. So anyway, I don't want to be spending time talking about tactics that I believe in if it's not something that's used at your agency, because it's kind of useless. Similarly, case law changes quite often. And if I were to record an episode, say here we are at episode, I think 102, 103, somewhere in there, and I'm talking about case law, the good chance that by the time I get to episode 150, that case law has changed, been overturned, added to, so on and so forth. So if I'm giving case law and someone's finding this show and going back through the archives and then using my scenarios and my evaluation of case law to then go out and be on patrol, they may be operating with old information. And as we all know, case law changes almost on a daily basis. So that's why I don't cover those things specifically, at least in the specifics of it. But one thing that's obvious, one thing that we obviously need is consistent training and an agreement worldwide on our mentality and our mindset when we need to survive in the street, that will to survive. And that without that predetermined mindset that we will survive the encounter, that we will go home at the end of the night, we are immediately putting ourselves at a disadvantage, a tactical disadvantage, by not having that mindset ready. And Jim has spent the last 20, 30 years really teaching cops how to develop that mindset. And the Street Survival course is one of those things. Now, along with the Street Survival course, originally, back in the day, and I mean the day like the 80s, the original Street Survival book came out. And it was a basically street cop's Bible on how to do everything. And it talks specifically about tactics and procedures and searching and firearms and building searches and all sorts of stuff. But that book required a rewrite and an edit to update itself for the newer police culture, the newer tactics, the better things that have occurred, but also reinforce some of the things that have been tried and true over the last 40 years since that book first came out. And Jim is one of the co-authors of the new Street Survival 2 book, put out by Calibre Press, his company. And it's impressive, to say the least. I mean, the book, I'm holding it right now as I talk, and it is thick. It's 375 pages, talking about stuff from physical and mental wellness to firearms training, searching procedures, considerations for knife attacks, bailing out of the cars, developing your mindset, for the shift, mental rehearsals, all sorts of stuff. And so Jim was on the show, a fantastic guest, a real leader in law enforcement. He's, I think I introduced him as Lieutenant Jim Glennon. He did 29 years in the Chicago area. So the guy knows what he's talking about when it comes to working in a high threat environment. He's also written the textbook. Many of you who are criminal justice majors probably read his book, Arresting Communication, Essential Interaction Skills for Law Enforcement. So writing a book like this is a daunting task when you have to cover it for the whole nation, and I think they achieved it. It's pretty impressive. To get information on the book and where to get it, there's not a link or anything like that, or I don't get a kickback is what I'm trying to say. But go to the show notes at thesquadroom.net, and we'll be able to give you the link to where you can find that book. All right, for now, I'll stop talking, and I'll introduce Lieutenant Jim Glennon. Lieutenant Jim Glennon of Calibre Press, welcome to the squad room.
Well, my pleasure. It's really my honor to be here. I'm so happy you asked, and we get this chance to talk for the next hour or so, and I've been looking forward to it. Your name is spread all over the nation as one of you're one of the most prolific trainers, and one of your titles here is lead trainer at Calibre Press. But you're one of the owners, and for people who aren't familiar, we'll get to what Calibre Press is in a minute. But you're known for your training all over the country too. Tell us a little bit about your background in that, with Calibre Press and with your training. Well, I was brought up by a cop. My dad was a police officer in Chicago, and his dad was a cop in Chicago. And my dad was a cop till I was about 7. And I'm the oldest of 9. So around that time, he stopped being a police officer because he was having kids every other week. So, he couldn't afford them all on a cop's salary. But that's what was always in my head, even through college. And then when I became a police officer, and I think I saw my first Street Survival seminar probably late 80s, early 90s, and it really struck me. So when I made sergeant, my 10th year on, I made sergeant, and for the next 18 years, I was in charge of use of force. And so 3 years later, I became a commander, a lieutenant, and I kept the same job running all that, besides a shift and all that. Mm. But I really got interested in training because most of the training we had was terrible. Mm. And so I started doing a lot of training in the Chicago area and Midwest. And then at one point, Calibre Press saw me. I was teaching for Northwestern University management course after I got my master's degree. And somebody from Calibre saw me. And at the time, there were only 2 other instructors. They asked me if I'd be interested. And I tried not to jump out of my shoes. I was so excited about it. So I did that for about 8 years. And when I retired, and it's a long story that we don't even need to go into, but right after I retired, about a year and a half later, we had the opportunity to buy the company. Mm. And we bought it And when I say we, it was actually my wife, my sister, who both worked for Calibre Press. We bought the company and we expanded it from one seminar, which was Street Survival. And now I think we have somewhere in the area of 15 to 20 different types of seminars with 12 instructors. And we did over 200 seminars last year around the United States and Canada.
So you've really expanded this. What was, I mean, it traditionally was also a publishing company, right? I mean, books and stuff like that would come out of Calibre Press, right?
Right. Well, that's how it started.
Mm-hmm.
Chuck Bremsberg, who is still around, he's in Chicago. I just talked to him yesterday. He used to actually work for the National Enquirer, and he was a writer. And you're too young to remember this, but before there was actual videos of police officers getting involved in things, Motorola Films used to interview cops and then recreate the event. Like one of the first ones I ever saw from Motorola Films was the Newhall incident, CHP.
Mm-hmm.
So they recreated that, and they started recreating some other things. And so Remsburg actually interviewed these police officers, and a guy named Denny Anderson was the videographer. And after they did a bunch of these, they realized that they had a book.
Mm-hmm.
And they wound up, Denny was in charge of getting the pictures, taking the pictures, finding archived pictures, and Chuck interviewed all the police officers and put these stories together and these tactics together with, he had like a couple of other actual police officers helping him through it with the terminology. So the book came out in 1980, and it just exploded. And from that came the seminar.
Okay. All right. So yeah, that first one came out in the 80s, and I'm holding the book right now. That you now have a second edition, right? But that first one came out in the 80s, and it was, like you said, very successful. And then the class, I've heard from people all around the country who've gone to that class and said it's one of the best trainings they've ever done. But this is not a small book, and it's not a small topic you cover in this book. This thing is comprehensive. I don't even know if there's a word above comprehensive in terms of what it covers in relationship to the street level police work we do. But why did you undergo a rewrite of the original book?
You know, it's a great question. We get that all the time. But even when I was just working for Calibre Press, you know, it's, if you have it, the old one it's got the black and white pictures,
Mm-hmm.
a black and white cover. There's a whole chapter in there, how to clean your revolver.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, and people have been saying forever, you know, when are you guys going to update this? When are you going to update it? And I'll be honest with you, the last thing I wanted to do was update this book because, as you said, it's pretty meaty. It's got about 135,000 words in it.
Yeah.
And if you remember when you were in high school and you had to do a 250-word essay, you'd cry for about a week before you sat down and tried to do 250 words. Well, this is 135,000 words.
Mm-hmm.
And about, I think there's 250 pictures, diagrams in it.
Mm-hmm.
So, honest to God, just sitting down and going through the original book, my head was spinning. And I had already written one book about communication, body language, things like that, called Arresting Communication. And I really enjoyed the process. But to rewrite one, I did somebody else's, I didn't want to do. So my editor, actually, Crawford Coates, said to me when we were at a seminar in Cleveland, we were sitting in a bar in Cleveland with a bunch of Cleveland cops who were talking about this. And he said to me, you know, the thing is, we got to be able to clone you. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, somebody who can write but also has the experience. And right away I said, oh my God, that's Dan Marco. I mean, really read that fast. And sitting there, I called Lieutenant Dan Marco, who has written about 6 books. And he's from Wisconsin, a very, very good tactician, much better than I am at that, much better. Mm-hmm. And I called him on the spot, and on the spot, he said, oh my God, this is one of the greatest honors of my life. I love this book. It saved my life. I'm just about to retire. I'm thinking about what else to do, what other books to write. I would love to do this. And so for the next 18 months, he did the first draft of it. I got it in December of 2017. And I spent the next 3.5 months on it. Then we got with the pictures. Then we had to call people and FOIA requests to get some of the pictures. And we had to decide exactly what to keep, what to take out, what to update. And if you're looking at the new book, what you can tell is that we wanted to have a connection with the iconic original Street Survival book. So we left I'd say about 20 pictures in the book. But we updated the terminology, put in about 5-6 totally new chapters on the things that we're dealing with now. So
I want to give people an idea too. Like I'm just flipping through it as we talk, and just to give people some idea of the coverage that this book covers, but we talk about the reactionary gap or contact and cover, using time to your advantage, approaching a door, pieing corners, barricaded subjects. I'm just keep flipping, shooting positions, tactical considerations with, vehicle approaches. You do a lot of debriefs. This is what I really liked in this book was, there are debriefs or discussions of officer, involved shootings or, officer assaults that you debrief. And, real stories, modern stories, some of them pictures, some of them very graphic. Verbal commands. It's overwhelming. And to even begin where to start on such a massive topic as policing, but it's covered. And it's fascinating that it's able to be done in a book you can still hold in one journal or in one volume. I mean, what has been, what in purchasing Calibre, what did you want to develop it into?
Well, I can go on with that for about a year, because I'll tell you something, I did not want to purchase it.
Oh, really?
I really didn't. I was working for them, and I liked, after 18 years of being a boss, I just wanted to go out on the road. Tell me where to go. Let me go do my thing,
Right.
But I like to research. I like to write. I'd already talked to them about writing some other books, and the things just weren't working out with them. And my wife decided to quit, and I had a little company on the side. And Lisa had a dream about having a bigger company. When we had the opportunity to do Calibre Press, she had at that point met all these great instructors around the country. And we brought on about 3 guys right away, let them teach their things, honed that down. And it started exploding so quickly, we couldn't even keep up with ourselves. I mean, we are now a company of 12 instructors, contract instructors. I have 1 full-time instructor who just retired, Kelly Duvall from Georgetown, Texas. And we have about 10 full-time employees in the office, just trying to keep the, this thing moving forward.
Was your wife in law enforcement or too? Was she looking for more of the entrepreneurial thing?
Entrepreneurial. She was never in law enforcement. Didn't know anything about it until we got together. And we got together about 19 years ago. My sister had nothing to do with law enforcement. It just kind of like everything fell into place. And so now I have, my sister's a part owner. Lisa and I are the owners. Lisa's sister is our director of sales. Her sales team is her daughter.
A family affair.
Yeah, right. Yeah, my daughter Kristen is in charge of our communications and marketing. She does all our videos.
Okay.
My future niece-in-law is their scheduler.
It's a family tree and a business.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So it's a blurred line, but they're very, 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 very passionate about it. When they first, I'll tell you an interesting thing. When Linda, who is our top salesperson, I didn't want to hire any of these people. And I said, look, they don't know anything about law enforcement. They had never sold before. And Linda went to a seminar and sat through one in Michigan. And it was actually at lunch of the first day of the 2-day seminar that Lisa, Lynn, and I just went to lunch. And I was teaching it by myself, I think. And she literally looked at me and said, "Oh my God." I said, "What?" She goes, I had no idea. I said, "No idea what?" Well, I thought this was going to be like a high school classroom type thing. I had no idea it was, this is an event. This is huge. This is, So it was easy to get them involved. And now when we get emails, which is constantly, "Hey, thank you. You saved my life. This was great stuff." We send all those emails to the office staff because we want them to know that this just isn't a job. You are out there saving lives. You're affecting human beings. And I have seen my office staff get emails and burst into tears. Yeah. So it's interesting.
Powerful. So you mentioned they didn't know anything about policing, but you certainly did your time in pushing the black and white yourself. But then in rewriting this book, it had to cause some reflection for you on the changes that have happened in policing since the first edition came out in the 80s. And what were some of those biggest changes that you recognized?
Well, it's interesting when you teach. I've said this a million times. People often say that old adage: "Those who can do, those who can't teach." And I've always said this: those that teach learn to do better. Mm-hmm. And I've been standing in front of people since '91, so I have become massively involved in constant research. I actually love research, which is something I hated 30 years ago. Mm. So we were constantly on top of this, and I have 12 instructors, and all of them except one are supervisors. Several of them have been involved in serious stuff. I got 3 chiefs that work for me. These are very, very smart people, and the amount of emails we have going back and forth between us when somebody reads something or sees something it takes up half your day. I got one this morning before I woke up about a shooting in Eugene, Oregon. I don't know if you saw this yet, but it was a body camera. And I came into the office, and the first hour I edited that with training points and put it on our YouTube channel. And it was up by 10 o'clock this morning. Mm. And I got it about 7:30 from one of the other guys. So when we looked at this, one of the things to answer your question, one of the things we looked at was, first off, what in the book doesn't make sense anymore. And one of those things was cleaning your revolver. Mm-hmm. But surprisingly, maybe not surprisingly, a lot of the tactics, how you enter a room, were as valid today as they were in 1980 when the book was published.
The fundamentals.
The fundamentals. But then we've also come across, and Dan did a great job on this, Dan Marcoux. He's very into active shooter training, and since that's a hot topic, obviously, especially all this stuff was going on when Parkland was going on, we were finishing the book. Dan put some very modern techniques. We talk about Columbine in there. We talk about getting in there. We even talk about some of the problems with Parkland. We literally were about to go to publishing when we got some more stories. We go, we got to hold off and put this stuff in now. Mm-hmm. So that type of thing. From a tactical standpoint, we updated, but also the attitude, the perception of law enforcement. We wanted to address that also.
How so? Explain how that's shifted and changed, and it's always a moving target, it seems.
Yeah, it does. Like I said, we do about 15 to 20 different types of courses, and several of them. I do leadership, communication, and survival type stuff. A lot of supervisory type stuff. And one of the things that we bring up is that there's a huge myth, which is that the public doesn't trust the police and doesn't like the police. And it couldn't be further from the truth. But if you just watch the media, well, that's the only thing that makes the news. I had a very, very popular national media figure tell me something off the record. He says, look, good cops don't sell, bad cops sell.
Yeah. And
we're looking to get people to click as much as we can. You watch Fox News or CNN or MSNBC or something. They're just as concerned. In fact, I've heard more concerned about the click rate on their web pages than they are on who's actually watching them on the tube. So they have said racist cops sell, bad cops sell, out of control cops sell, and that's what pushes. But I get Gallup, Rasmussen, Reuters, Pew polls. Mm-hmm. And you can look it up right now. Law enforcement is always in the top 5 of most respected and what people have the most confidence in. And we are light years ahead of the media. And we show those actual slides in seminars. So one of the reasons we do that is because we want the police officers to be proud of their jobs, because we were starting to hear at seminars like, I don't even want to wear anything like cop-like outside because so many people hate the cops. And but it's not true. And I hear from police officers around the country, citizens walk right up and thank them in restaurants all the time, much more than they get abuse. But the abuse is what gets the attention.
Yeah, I think that's such a key point. The clickbait. I've never watched a newscast where the breaking news at the beginning of the newscast is that everything is fine, everything is good, and there's nothing new today. Like in breaking news, 1 million cops went out and did their job today and did a good job and upheld the oath, and like that, nobody's going to watch that because it's the assumption, right? And there is assumed. I always think, I was thinking about this the other day. My son was excited. He brought home a sheriff's deputy Hot Wheels car. Just like you see, like we've had when I grew up, and just a Hot Wheels car. And it was deputy sheriff, and it looked very similar to the car that I, drove, a Crown Vic. But I was thinking in that, Mattel or whoever makes Hot Wheels, I think it's Mattel, they don't make an accountant's car, Or
no.
They don't make a dentist's Mercedes. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
It is an iconic position, but it is still something that people look to, and it's still one of those professions that the vast majority of people think incorrectly, I would say, but they think I can't do that. Because I used to be that way too. I used to think I couldn't do this job. I'm not a warrior like that, or I don't have that in me. But nonetheless, Mattel makes deputy sheriff cars or ambulance cars or firefighter trucks. They don't make accountants Mercedes E300s, you know?
Right, exactly right.
And it's because this is an aspirational thing. It's an aspirational career for many people who see us, right? We had a major natural disaster in my area just about a year ago, and dozens of people were killed in a slide. And the amount of people who came up, and it was like hitting reset. I work in a pretty genial environment anyway, but it was like hitting reset with some of that, and people were stopping and just overwhelmed with their appreciation for us in all this, because they were looking for somebody to lead, but also show them the way forward. You know, here's this massive disaster. Homes are destroyed. Families literally torn apart, and we're there with our command presence and our authority, but through that our leadership. And people were so thankful that we were there to show them the way, as simple as that was. You know, does that make sense?
Makes total sense, and I hear this all over the country. It is amazing how we're portrayed in the media, and it's so contrary to what's going on out there. And people want to feel safe. Mm-hmm. I wrote an article, I don't know, about 6 months ago. Some professor wrote this thing that we should sit and talk to the community and find out what they really want and what they really want us responding to. And I said, that's, no offense to you. You got a PhD, but you want to know what they want? Just look at the 911 call, see what they want. They will tell you what they want. They call for these reasons, right? You don't need to do a study. Look at the 911 calls. You want to know where the crime is? Look where the 911 calls are coming from. And people, the bottom line is people want to feel safe. And in a couple of our seminars, we talk about Peel's 9 principles, and the police are the public and the public are the police. So one of the things we really hammer in Street Survival now is that we're not hired mercenaries. We are literally part of the community, and we are giving this very honorable position, and we need to treat it with honor and respect. And that's what sometimes, it gets me upset when we have been accused at Calibre Press of teaching the craziest stuff. And in truth, what we teach is what the pundits and the activists would want police officers to learn. But they believe that almost any police training is just to kill first and, ask questions later. And that's it's total nonsense. It's total nonsense.
Yeah, I think, Peel's principles are as relevant today. Like because you have them in the book. And so I was reviewing them as we were getting ready to talk, and just found that there was none of those that were outdated, even though these were written in the early 1800s.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's how revolution
1829. He wrote those.
Okay.
The group did 1829,
and how revolutionary these were at the time. But to me, that the one you just hit on, that the police are the public and the public are the police, and we are. And people. I try to emphasize this with people a lot, and it gets missed, because they understand, like a senator, right? A senator is someone who is elected by us, who is our full-time representative, but he is as much a part of us in representing us as anything else. And we as the police are the same thing. We're just the full-time representative of the rest of the public in terms of what they want in their health and safety, and their ability to enjoy their freedoms. So it's a fascinating thing I would encourage anybody to review, because it's just so timely. Right. And it's timely and timeless, I guess, is one way to say it. Right. So one of the things... Go ahead.
Let me just make one more point about that.
Please.
If you really read those, and I don't have it verbatim in front of me, but at one point he actually even says that we cannot overreact to public sentiment. We have to do our job. In other words, we shouldn't be ruled by mob mentality. It was really amazing in 1829 that, there's some speculation who actually wrote these, but they were certainly under Peel. And we're running into that right now, where, we have pundits are saying, well, we shouldn't enforce these small laws. We shouldn't do this. We shouldn't do that. And I think, too often we have administrators overreacting to the screams, and the people screaming very, very often really know what they're talking about.
Yeah, there's two here that I'll probably talk. The ability of the police to perform their duties is dependent upon public approval of police actions. And,
Right.
that one talks about legitimacy. And then the next one, police must secure the willing cooperation of the public in voluntary observance of the law to be able to secure and maintain the respect of the public. It's we're all in this together.
Right. And that involves trust. Any relationship has to have trust.
Mm-hmm.
And we certainly, as police officers, but the thing is my God, the amount of times I've said this, I can't even count. But there are 18,000 different police agencies in the United States and 800,000 to 1 million police officers. And sometimes the media and activists portray us as we all get together every morning, all 800,000 of us huddle up and go, let's go screw them. I mean, it's just, it's nothing like that. We're the opposite of that. And what they do is they take anecdotal events and go, look at this as an example of what law enforcement is. But the amount of lives we save compared to the amount of lives that are taken every year, you can't even calculate it. But that does not mean we don't have people with the wrong attitude in law enforcement. And in our seminars and in the book, we talk about it.
There's something I talk about on the show here a lot is in relation to this adverse media attention or these adverse communities, that the minority opinion that we are not valued. I talk about it using a story from the Battle of 300 about how we must fight in the shade. And so you're probably familiar with the story, but a runner comes to Leonidas during the Battle of Thermopylae and complains to him and says that the Persians have so many archers that when they launch their arrows, it'll darken the sky. And right. Leonidas replies, "Well, good. Then we shall fight in the shade." And it's flipping this, and that's what I encourage my audience to do, and push them to almost enjoy the opportunity to work and do positive work in such an environment, because it's a challenge we are up for and that we need to be worthy of pursuing.
Exactly, 100%. The thing is, though, that too often, two things I have found happening. Mm-hmm. Police officers are starting to close up their ranks a little bit. In certain areas, they don't feel as though they're being respected, when in fact by the public most of the time they are. Mm-hmm. And they don't believe that they're bosses. They think, many, not all, believe me, I get accused of this too often. I don't know what the percentage is, but there is a percentage of administrators out there who overreact to public sentiment, mm-hmm. To the detriment of eventually the public, because what the police officers have learned is if I don't do anything, I really can't get in trouble. Mm-hmm. I mean, think about it. You're a sergeant. Have you ever pulled a guy in after, who's been on 10 years and go, look, we've been talking about you for 10 years. You just suck. I mean, you're terrible. And you've been terrible since the day you got here. We don't know how you passed the test. I mean, we all work for guys like that. Mm-hmm. I mean, we don't have these conversations. We don't fire a guy because of a 10-year process of lousy work. We mm-hmm. don't. And I'm not advocating firing police officers. Don't get me wrong. But officers learn pretty quickly that I really can't get fired for doing nothing. Mm-hmm. I can actually only get fired if I do something. Mm-hmm. And then, you come on, like you're the same. I always ask in seminars, how many of you guys at some point in your life remember not wanting your days off? And they all laugh, How many said at some point, I do this for free, Right. Hands go up. But the veteran officers, the bureaucracy of law enforcement, government, beat you down. Mm-hmm. I always say in my supervisory classes, when we talk about motivation, I go, look, here's the thing. These are the most motivated individuals in American society. Mm-hmm. Look what you have to do to become a police officer. They're motivated. Right. The only thing we can do as bosses is screw that up. And believe me, we screw it up pretty quick.
Oh, that's so true.
So the veteran officers get a hold of them right away. You go, slow down, kid, slow down. You're going to get, and then the first time you get in trouble and a boss overreacts, the officer just says, okay, I'll shut down. And then eventually this affects how our service to the public. And now this divide between us, my argument in many articles is it's more coming from the media and the activists than anybody else.
So how do we as individual officers not let that get to us? You were an administrator, but you also came up through the ranks. You didn't come in as a lieutenant. You must have a way that you found internal motivation to go out every day and do good work. I have that too. I always find it in just the purpose of the job. Is that something that as a boss, you just need to continually remind your people about why they're here?
I think so. But you used the right word, internal.
Mm-hmm.
There is something inside of, I would argue this to this day, that 90% of the people that come into law enforcement have a passion for it.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't think there's many that say, oh, it's got a good pension program. I remember when I was 24 and I became a cop and they started, they sit you down with all the paperwork. Going, here's your pension program. I don't even know what that means. I don't care. Just,
right.
Can I go on the street today?
Yeah.
So it is an internal thing, but that internal, it's called intrinsic. It's intrinsic innate, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's been studies on this. Your motivation is intrinsic. In other words, if I'm allowed to do what I'm both passionate and good at, if I'm allowed to do that, then I'm motivated.
Yeah.
Right. I was very, very good at, the only thing I brag about, I was very, very good at interviewing people. Taught that for years. I understand body language, wrote a book on it. I have a psychology degree. I love to be in the box and talk to somebody, get them to confess. I love to read body language. And so my bosses let me do that. I was a sex crimes investigator. I was an arson investigator. But if they tried to make me a forensics guy, picking up, fingerprints and stuff, I would have been depressed.
Right.
So too often what we do is we're overreacting to these silly beliefs out in the street. Bosses aren't standing up to their political powers, and they at least subliminally are telling the police officers do less. And that's happening around the United States. What we should be doing as bosses is, and it's one of the reasons we wrote the book and we do the seminars, is I say this to kids all the time. I go, look, you have to learn your craft. You have to learn your craft. There is not enough time in the day for your department. There's not enough money to train you the way you need to be trained. So you need to learn your craft. You need to read. You need to understand the reality of what's going on out there, because we can become very insular and pretty soon believe everything in our own echo chambers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's one of the biggest dangers we encounter. I talk about it as a psychological salary. You get, like you said, I got a pension and I get a paycheck, and those are things that are obviously I need, but I could also get a paycheck and some sort of pension or retirement system through any other job. It's the things that I come to work for and that I get something out of when I'm at work, and It's that fulfillment. And it's an interesting idea you touched on about being allowed to do the work you do. Or being allowed to flourish in the part of the job that you were good at. Right. And to me, it's always fascinating. I brought this up on another show recently about how the job of being a cop is so vast and so big that you have such a wide variety of people coming into the job. You have someone who really likes working with youth and is a school resource officer, and maybe that's their path. And that's a much different cop than the full-time SWAT officer or the motor officer. They're different things that all have to accomplish some of the same goals, but but as a result, it attracts all these different personalities with kind of the same foundation. And how it wasn't the topic of our discussion today, but now you got me on it. How do you, as a supervisor, encourage and tease out those things that help people find what their purpose within the job is?
Get to know them. Even Eisenhower said this. The one thing you must do is get to know your men, and you need to get to know them quickly. And I use the word men, but your people, and they'll tell you what they want. And I'm not talking about a formal thing. Just if you get to know somebody, you naturally know what they're good at, what they like, what they're interested in. And when I took over detectives, I had a sergeant that was already there and told this story a million times, and he wasn't my favorite guy, but he sat me down and talked to me about my 13 detectives, and he got to one guy, and I'll tell you his name. His name was Scott Heim. And he said, I think Scott should be, we should get rid of Scott. I don't think he should be a detective. And I said, why? I mean, he's a smart guy. I know Scott. How long has he been back here? He says 10 months. And I said, and he's no good? And he says, no, he's terrible. I said, what do you got him doing? He goes, he's a juvenile officer. He's a juvenile detective. I said, have you talked to him about it? Yeah. What's he say? He said, well, he hates kids. I go, anything else? He goes, yeah, he hates their parents more. So I go, is he good at anything? And he goes, oh, yeah. And this is literally, I remember this as a quote, he's really, really good at financial crimes. Now, I don't think you have to be a genius to figure this out, right? So I went and talked to Scott. And long story short, I made him a financial crimes guy. And 6 months later, the state's attorney, you guys call them district attorneys, I think, in California, he called me 6 months into it. And this is a big county. It's the second biggest county in Illinois. And he said, hey, look, who's this guy? And I go, what did he do? He goes, No, because I knew the state's attorney. He goes, no, I want him to put on classes on how to teach the other financial crimes guys in this county how to present a case.
Wow.
That's how good he was. But I also knew this about Scott. Scott he had bowled 300 twice. Now think about the personality that can bowl 300. Even if I bowled the first 9 frames, all strikes, what would I be thinking the last time I picked up a ball to get to 300? Yeah. Don't screw this up,
don't
right?
Screw it up, right?
Right. And I talked to Scott about it. He goes, oh, no, I just think of it, it's another. So he had a very algorithmic type personality. The forensics guys do that. The financial crimes guys do that. Then you got the flip side of guys who are really good at getting interviews. And they're more what we call heuristic, more innate. Mm-hmm. So to try, there's an old saying, you can't make a shortstop out of a catcher. Right. And what they do in government, in law enforcement, and I've had guys argue this with me in class, is we try to make everybody the same.
Yeah.
But Peter Drucker, who is a guru of management, he said something, trying to make everybody the same just breeds mediocrity. So, yeah, they all have to be able to do the basics, but, some guys would never in a million years want to be a motor cop, and other guys would want to be a motor cop for 20 years. Yeah. Now, I'm not saying let them do whatever the heck they want. They got to prove themselves, and they actually have to have it can't just be passion. It's got to be some talent too. So, I think that's part of the problem in law enforcement is we're more worried about liability. I ask this question all the time. We really are off the topic we started on, but
that's fine.
I ask this question in the supervisor class all the time. I go up to a chief from high-ranking guys, and I if there's 10 of them, I do it to everybody in there. And I go, were you successful as a law enforcement agency last year? And I always get the same kind of answer. Yeah, well, I'd like to think so. I said, great. Okay, prove it. And they go, what? I go, prove it. Prove to me you were successful. Mm-hmm. Well, no cops got killed. That's what always comes up. I go, oh, well, I know a good way never to get a cop killed. Don't hire any. Mm-hmm. But the reason we exist is not to get guys killed. That's a beautiful goal.
Yeah.
But how do you prove success in law enforcement? And really what it winds up coming down to, and we talk about it in these classes, I had a chief say to me, he was about the 5th guy I went to, and I go, were you successful? And his answer was this: do I still have a job? And I said, you do. And he goes, then I was successful. And all the chiefs in the room, was the chiefs conference, broke out laughing. And he goes, listen, I know where you're going. He says, the problem in government is if we try to do something new, that brings attention on us. If there's no attention on us, that's what all the politicians want. They don't want attention on the police department. So we just learn to maintain and stay underneath the radar. And, if you think about that, that's very, very accurate. So we don't really encourage, like in my business now that I own a private business. I mean, you get a free paycheck for 30 years, Garrett. Mm-hmm. And now you go into the, if I have a day, a week, a month, or a year where I suck as a police officer, I'm still getting paid.
Right.
But you come over and you have a private business, and everything is dependent on product, customer service. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's basically what it is. Right. And on this side, what we do is we encourage creativity. I had a meeting with everybody in the office yesterday, and I said, let's just spitball. We put 3 hours, everybody throwing out ideas. And when do you see that in law enforcement? I mean, it's rare. In fact, most of the time you come up with a new idea, somebody will say, shut up. Everything's going fine. I only have 5 more years before I get my pension. Don't screw it up for me now. Mm-hmm. I'm a sergeant. I don't want to be a lieutenant. I don't want you guys messing up. So it's almost the opposite. But then that permeates into everything, including officer safety, because it becomes part of your attitude.
Yeah. So how do we continue to progress? And one of the questions I always try to answer, and that I'm currently trying to answer, is, if I don't think it's fair to judge an officer based on their strict stats, their arrests, their citations, whatever.
Right.
There are so many intangibles to this job, going back to the kinds of cops that we have, from SRO to SWAT to motors. There's so many intangibles that are really hard to measure, that bring significant value to an agency, that don't get put on paper or on a booking sheet. How can we measure our success? How do we do that?
By trusting not only our guys, but trusting the bosses. Because what you wind up, and listen, don't misunderstand me. I believe that you have to track statistics, but to force statistics, you'll get exactly what you asked for. If you want 20 tickets a month, and in fact, most states now you can't even do that. Mm-hmm. So here's what I believe. I've always believed this. The most important job in any law enforcement officer is at the line level. I mean, you can't do the job without the line level. But in order for the line level to succeed, the most important position in the law enforcement agency is the sergeant, the first line supervisors. And they have to be outside. I call it the 75-25 rule. 75% of your time you need to be interacting with your troops, because then what you do is you know who's working. Listen, how do you coach, counsel, train, discipline if you're not out there actually working with anybody?
Sure, right.
If you still can't do the job. So the sergeants are a key. They have to be out there. They have to trust their guys. They have to watch what they do. They have to know what they're doing, those intangibles, right? Mm-hmm. Then the commanders have to trust their sergeants. Mm-hmm. Because we're not just – nobody in your city knows what your crime stats are. All they know is this. I called 911 and took you guys 20 minutes to get here. You know, if somebody broke into the house next door, I never see a cop on my street.
Right.
So internally, we have to have relationships within the organization, strong teamwork. You know, there's an old saying, individuals accomplish tasks, but teams accomplish goals. And then the other side of that is we have to partner with the community as best we can, which means we have to educate them, get them involved. You know, the Citizens Police Academy, I tell you, I was so against us doing that, mostly because they put me in charge of it. And I'm like, I don't want to do this. Mm-hmm. It was the smartest, best thing we've ever done. And when I asked that question around the country, I've never had anybody argue that. These people who go through and learn what the mm-hmm. basics of what we are, and that we're not NCIS, we're not Bad Boys 2, we're not Lethal Weapon, and they learn about what we actually do, they are our best advocates. So we need to be proactive as administrators mm-hmm. and develop relationships with the community. And there's a lot of big cities, there are a lot of towns in this country that are doing just that. So when something does happen, the community itself will say, wait a minute, let's find out what the truth is. Let's wait for the facts to come in because we trust these guys.
Yeah.
But if you don't have that relationship, they're going to jump to what they see on the tube.
Yeah. What I talk about often is we need to be able to tell our story, you know, and if we tell our story, then people do just that. Then they understand us and they know where we're coming from. And then we end up with that relationship and benefit of the doubt. And Citizens Academies are fantastic. I'm actually a cop as a result of one. You know,
really?
I did the LA Sheriff's Academy, and it was through the learning more and more about the job, and then ride-alongs as a result of, you know, as part of the Citizens Academy, and then that quickly spun into realizing that this is what I wanted to do. So yeah, Citizens Academy is anything like that where we can reduce the gap between us and the public is fantastic. And I think it goes to a point that people often miss about this idea of the thin blue line. Like, that line is not a line between us and the public, you know, and people need to understand, officers need to understand that that's not the line. You know, the line is us standing there on behalf of the public with them at our shoulders, you know.
Right.
We get this division sometimes. So I'll direct us back to the book so I can stay on topic, because I could talk about a wide variety of things with you all day long. But one thing we talk about also on the show, and that you talk about in the book, is dealing with stress and managing stress during and after critical incidents.
Right.
What are some of the things you've done through your own career and now as a business owner to manage stress?
Well, you know, there's two types of stress, and that's what we talk about in the book. You asked me about the meat of that book. You know, one of the hardest things was what can't we put in it? So we're already about 40,000 words into our follow-up, which is right now tentatively titled The Long Game. Mm. And we talk about this in Street Survival. We call it the 24/7/30, and it's living your life as a police officer for 20, 25, 30 years. So you have two types of stress. The first type of stress, and the one that everybody sees on TV, is what we call sudden onset acute stress. This is where out of nowhere, you know, we're just normal people driving around a squad car. We're not ready, you know, like superheroes all the time. And out of nowhere, and you know this, everything can turn to, you know,
you can say it however you want.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Turn to shit very, very quickly. Right. In a matter of a second, you can be involved in something like this Eugene case. You know, how many times you get a call of a parent dispute? You get them all the time, but nobody pulls a gun on a parent. Most parent disputes, and this guy all of a sudden starts acting up, pulls a gun, and a couple seconds later, there's an SRO who, think about what the SRO's daily job really is. Hi, kids, how are you? You know, I mean, he's there, he's protecting them, he's a great guy, and don't get me wrong. But the SRO is laying on the ground in front of this guy's kid and has to put a gun to his temple and shoot him in the head. And that whole thing happens in about 30 seconds. So that's sudden onset acute stress. And here's what we don't do, Garrett, is we don't train these officers for it. We tell them what it is, but we don't train them for it. And if you look at the statistics in the surveys that we use, we found that most police officers never go through. I can't remember the exact number, but 65% of the country, the officers in the country, are only mandated to shoot twice a year. And when they shoot only twice a year, they're just learning how to point the gun in the right direction so they can qualify.
Right.
And if you think about this, I don't know how about you guys are, but how often do you guys actually do extensive defensive tactics training?
Oh, not enough. Yeah.
No, not at all. You do it once a year for 4 hours, and it's really just to check a box. So what happens is my favorite slide I've ever put in a seminar, and we use it all the time, is this. In sports, they train for these moments over and over and over and over. They know who they're going to play, when they're going to play. They can look at film. They even know what the damn weather is going to be like, right? Mm-hmm. And with us, it comes out of nowhere. And in sports, they train for this. But in law enforcement, we just hope that common sense and an untaught, unlearned skill set just magically kicks in at the most pressure-filled, stress-filled moment of an officer's life. Mm. And if they don't perform perfectly, too often, they're thrown under the bus, at least by the media and sometimes, unfortunately, by their bosses. They just throw, and then I saw a boss one time say this, and I knew the agency, and I'm not going to repeat what it is. But the boss on TV, the chief on TV, said this: "This is not consistent with our values and training." And I'm sitting at home going, "You're a liar. It's perfectly consistent with your values and training because you don't value training at all." Mm-hmm. They go down the range once a year. They never do defensive tactics training. This guy's in for a fight for his life, and a guy gets killed, and you're going, "Well, he shouldn't have done that. He should have done this and this." Are you crazy? Why? Why would you expect him to be able to do that when he has had no training in that? Mm-hmm. So that's sudden onset acute stress, right? It happens out of nowhere. The second stress is kind of what you and I talked about a little bit before we started the podcast, which is the cumulative chronic stress. And in the next book, we're really going to deal with this deeply. And that is the number one killer of law enforcement officers in the United States. Because if you think about this, and we show all these stats in our classes, and a lot of them are in the book, is on average over the last 20 years, about 160 police officers die, 165 police officers die a year in the line of duty. Mm-hmm. About 70 of those, about half, a little less than half actually, are killed feloniously. And on average, 54 are shot and killed a year by felons. 54 on duty, right? How many police officers kill themselves every year? And we don't even know. But Blue Help, which is a very, very good website, they're trying to track this. And I think their last estimate was about 150, but they said that's just what we know.
Right.
So let's add another 30 to 50% on top of that. So then how about heart attacks? And we worked with a guy, a doctor out of who's also a police officer out of Texas, John Scheinberg.
Oh yeah, and John's been on the show.
He has. John's a great guy, right? So he's talked about this, and I don't want to beat that up, but John estimates anywhere from 100 to 200 are dying of heart attacks because 14 a year are dying of heart attacks on the job. Mm-hmm. So you got to figure 10 times that off the job. So if you think about it, you have a 3 to 4 times better chance of being shot with your own gun by your own hand than a felon shooting you. Mm-hmm. And you have a 3 to 4 times better chance of having a heart attack and dying than a felon shooting you. So we don't train our officers to deal with the sudden onset acute stress, and we don't at all train them how to deal with the chronic cumulative stress from what we see and experience on this job.
Yeah, and that's even some of those too. It's impossible to track the retirees, who have retired but have kept that with them, and it's even harder. So it's such a vague number, but it's a big number, and I'm sure one day we're going to get our handle on that, and we're all going to be shocked by the actual numbers that come in on that, because those things come with you. So you have another book coming out called Mindful Responder. Right. When is that out, and what? And that sounds like it deals with some of these things, but mindfulness was like the buzzword of 2018, but it really does have a lot of value. What's been your process in implementing mindfulness into your own life?
Well, it's interesting because this is not my book. This is Crawford Coates' book. He's my editor, and I didn't even know what it was until about a year and a half ago. And I told him mindfulness is basically being in the moment, understanding the moment, accepting the moment and trying to enjoy basically the moment. And after Crawford introduced me to this, what I try to do every day is I close my eyes and I sit down and I just kind of be in that moment. It's kind of meditation, but I throw a little prayer in there also. And I didn't realize, but a lot of large agencies are actually training their officers in mindfulness. So that book should be out in about 2 months. We're hoping by the end of March that it's out. And then the follow up to the Street Survival book, The Long Game, we're hoping that's out in about a year. Because writing the book is only part of it. Putting it together, making it look right, to getting the pictures and the diagrams and things like that in there. And in the long game, we're going to kind of piggyback off of what Crawford wrote in Mindfulness about what I just talked to you about. How really, as a bureaucratic police agency, do you deal with a guy who says, I'm depressed?
Yeah, and it's something we need to be more aware of. And like you said, we need to train our officers in dealing with those cumulative stresses, but we need to be prepared for it too and have a plan of action. And that seems to be something that people are finally starting to recognize.
Yes.
So, if people are like in the back of their head are trying to figure out where they might know you from, it might be from the media drama that occurred around the Bulletproof Warrior seminar that came out, and you were your Calibre was teaching the Bulletproof Warrior, and I think it was in St. Paul, wasn't it, or somewhere in Minnesota?
Yeah, it was Minnesota, and
it got some attention because it was right around that time of the. I'm going to get his name wrong, but there was an officer-involved shooting.
Geronimo Yanez shot Philando Castile.
Yeah, so that was a hot topic issue in the Twin Cities area, and then your class came into town right on the heels of that, and got called on the carpet for the term of the warrior, and there was a lot of, I'll say, conversation, I guess, about the use of that term, and it provoked a lot of people, and I think a lot of agencies, to start looking at the use of the word warrior. Where do you stand on that? And I ask because also there's a chapter in the book, in the update, on guardian or warrior, and who are we and what are we supposed to be? What's your answer to that?
Well, with the Minnesota case, what actually happened is we got a call and from the press and said that they found out, and I've never verified this, to be honest with you, that Geronimo Yanez was in our class, but he was according to them, in our class 2.5 years prior to the shooting. Mm-hmm. And the thing that stuck with them is the word warrior. Mm-hmm. And I have had literal, I wouldn't call them arguments with some trainers around the country said we should never use the word. And I can argue about a million ways why we should on occasion use that word, but my number one argument is this. If you tell a bunch of cops they can never be warriors and never have the warrior mentality, you'll lose them immediately. And I had a veteran officer say something to me that really struck me. He said, listen, they trust us with a gun, they trust us with life and death decisions, but they don't trust us with a word. Do they think we're too naive, too stupid to understand the difference between when we're supposed to be a guardian and when we're supposed to be a warrior? Mm-hmm. And that really stuck with me. And I really looked into this as best I could. And the fact of the matter is yes. And we love the term guardian. We use it. In fact, Plato said that it does not matter if the cobblers and the masons fail to do their jobs well, but if the guardians fail, the democracy crumbles. Mm-hmm. So, but we also understand that at times a guardian must be in a warrior mentality. I mean, it happened in San Bernardino. Mm-hmm. When, you had that one officer who literally looked at a bunch of frightened women and said this, I will take a bullet for you. Mm-hmm. Right? Well, what was he right then? He was both a guardian and a warrior simultaneously. Mm-hmm. But too many people go, we have this warrior mentality, and we constantly train that shoot first, ask questions later, better be carried by, tried by 12 than carried by 6, which, by the way, I took out of the book. It was in the book, that phrase. But the truth of the matter is that the word warrior, we don't train like warriors. And I already alluded to this. I had a civilian say, aren't you guys all karate experts? And I said, what are you talking about? Don't you guys do karate every day? And I go, no. For 2 hours every 2 years, we go down on a mat, throw 15 knee strikes, check a box that say we were there in case we get sued so we can say, yeah, I took it. Listen, I took martial arts for 14 years, and I was never any good at it. I mean, they give you a black belt if you just hang around long enough, right? Mm-hmm. But I would never put myself in a ring with anybody. But I was going about 4 to 5 days a week. And you have to go that much to get muscle memory. We're not getting muscle memory once a year on a mat with our best friend pretending we throw in knee strikes. Right?
Yeah,
so now it happens on the street. We don't train like warriors. We don't act like warriors. And nowhere in our training have we ever said this, everybody's out to kill you. Because I'll tell you something. We show stats. I'm going to hit you with a stat real quick. If you look at everything that we go CDC, FBI, BJS, right? Just on the low end, the Bureau of Justice Statistics said in 2015, we had 53.5 million face-to-face contacts with people, which is way low. It's much higher than that, but let's go with 53.5 million. We shot and killed a little under 1,000, which means we shot altogether about 4,000 to 5,000. So we say 4,500. Okay. So 4,500 people got shot by 18,000 different police agencies, 800,000 cops in 2015 out of 53.5 million contacts. So the amount of people we actually had contact with, the number that we shot is 0.0000841121. That's the number. If we were warriors on the rampage and we thought everybody was trying to kill us, we'd be out of control. And we're not. But people see that number and go, oh my God, it's almost 1,000. Let's keep it in perspective. Because we did this. We looked at the numbers of people who died in the United States in 2016, according to the CDC. And the estimate is 2,744,248 died in 2016. Their lives ended in 2016. According to Washington Post, we shot and killed 957 people. So of everybody that died in the entire United States, the percentage of people who died from being shot by the police is 0.0003487,294. So this whole warrior mentality, and say, well, we got to get away from the warrior mentality. We don't have the warrior mentality. But that doesn't mean at times when it strikes that you have to find that inner warrior. And then in a second later, we show a video of a guy who's literally carrying a woman shot while he's holding his gun out. And while he's holding his gun out trying to stop the husband from killing the kids,
right? He
is comforting the woman while he's also being a warrior.
Yeah.
So to pretend that we're never a warrior, we should never plan for a warrior moment, I find disheartening.
To me, because in the intro to my show, the first thing you hear is "you are a warrior," and I'm a firm believer in the use of that word. But also, I see it from the anthropological perspective of the Greeks and the Romans and the samurais, and how protecting the tribe or protecting the herd, the group, protecting their population was as much a part of the warrior idea as was the aggressive offensive stuff.
Right.
I always kind of use to me the idea of like a guardian. You think of like a mall guard, right, or a bank guard. The bank guard is a guy who, and what's he doing? He's standing with his back against a wall, with his weight on his heels, waiting for something to come to him. And to me, the warrior that's what we do. We go out, we leave the station, we drive around, and just our patrol presence alone, we're looking for the things that could interrupt someone's freedom and dignity and pursuit of happiness by pursuing it. Just a simple pursuit of the evil makes this a warrior mentality to me. But yeah, I think people too often focus on the war, those first three letters of that word. And then especially with being a country at war for the last 18 years, that meant they misinterpret the term based on those first three words to me. That's how it seems how it goes.
And that's why we ended the book. I think that's the epilogue in the book. We ended the book with that. But let me tell you one more real quick thing. I had a lieutenant of a state, nice guy. We had a disagreement about this. And he goes, even if you're in a gunfight, you should have more of a guardian mentality than a warrior mentality. And I said to him, listen, if somebody broke in your house and was trying to kill your kids, would that be the warrior or guardian? And he said to me, he goes, well, then that would be the warrior. I said, why? He goes, because it's my kids. I said, so you don't believe you should have the same mentality protecting the public than you do your kids? And he just kind of stared at me. He goes, that's a semantic argument. I go, the whole thing's a semantic argument.
Right. It really is.
So, yeah. It really is. So Yeah. So I think what we have to do is understand the balance in many, many ways in this country. And we do say that that's the hardest thing for officers to do is figure out how to balance. And then nowadays with the video, everybody in the whole world sees it. And now you got 330 million different opinions about what the officer shouldn't do while they sit back, drinking their double half-calf lattes.
Right. Lieutenant Jim Glennon, thank you for your time being on the show. Where can people find the Street Survival 2 book, your other information, and learn more about what you're up to in your classes?
Well, thanks. They go to calibrepress.com, C-A-L-I-B-R-E, not E-R. For some reason, they named it with the European version of it, but it's C-A-L-I-B-R-E press.com. And we have a new app that just came out, and we have a area where you can look at all of our upcoming seminars, but also buy the books. They are right there on the website.
We'll put links in the show notes too, of course, to Calibre and to your trainings and stuff, so that if people are moving around at the moment, they're listening to this in the car, whatnot, they can go to thesquadroom.net and find those as well. It'll be attached to your episode. Jim, thanks for your time today. Fantastic conversation. Really enjoyed it.
I did too. Thank you very much, Garrett, and good luck and stay safe out there.
Thank you very much. All right, thanks for listening to The Squad Room. If you like what you heard today, if you got something out of this conversation with Jim Glennon, please consider leaving a review on the podcast player of your choice. It really helps us spread the word of the show. If you heard something today that you know a friend or a loved one or a partner needs to hear, tell them about this show. Go to thesquadroom.net, and you can email this episode directly to someone. You can share it on your Facebook page, your Twitter, your, Snapchat. I don't know what you kids are doing these days. All right, to keep up to date, you can text The Squad Room, all one word, to 44222 to get signed up for our mailing list directly from your phone. And you also, of course, can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at The Squad Room, or join our Facebook group. Just search out The Squad Room Facebook. I can't talk today. Just search out The Squad Room Podcast group on Facebook, and you'll find us, and you can apply for a membership there. It's just a closed group, so we can keep it Leo-friendly, but we have some good discussions in there. All right, until next time, take care of each other and stay safe.